911, what's your emergency?
It's the trainer! She's not resurfacing! There's blood! The orca! It's not letting go! Please, send help now!
The water was calm. Trainers smiled as the music swelled. Children laughed, clapping in excitement as the massive black and white shape of an orca sliced through the pool. It was the perfect picture of family entertainment, until, in the blink of an eye, that illusion shattered. What began as a playful performance quickly turned into a nightmare. Trainer Tamarie Tollison was suddenly pulled beneath the surface, trapped in a violent struggle that no one in the audience could believe was real. This was not a stunt. It was not part of the show. It was a horrifying moment of life and death, one that exposed the dark, dangerous truth about orcas in captivity. Before we dive into this shocking story, make sure you hit that like button to support the channel, subscribe so you never miss our deep dives, and tap the bell icon to get notified when new stories drop. Now let's uncover the terrifying ordeal of Tamarie Tollison, her shocking struggle above water, the aftermath SeaWorld tried to silence, and what her ordeal revealed about the hidden dangers behind the smiling facade. Tamarie Tollison wasn't just another employee in a wetsuit. To the cheering crowds who filled the stands, she was part of the magic of SeaWorld, a confident, smiling trainer who seemed completely at ease alongside animals that could crush her with a single strike of their tail. Behind that smile was years of dedication. Tamarie was one of SeaWorld's most respected trainers, passionate, patient, and deeply committed to the whales she cared for. Day after day, she studied their signals, learned their personalities, and built relationships with creatures weighing over 5 tons. She balanced affection with caution, trust with fear. To the public, the shows looked effortless. Synchronized dives, playful splashes, breathtaking leaps into the air. But inside the trainer community, the truth was more complicated. These weren't circus props. They were apex predators with moods as unpredictable as the ocean itself. In quiet corners of the break room, whispers circulated. Stories of close calls, of whales that lunged without warning, of trainers pulled under just long enough to terrify them into silence. No trainer ever said it out loud to the crowds, but everyone knew. Working with orcas meant living with risk every single day. And yet, Tamarie stayed. She believed in the bonds she shared with these whales. She believed her years of training, her connection, her trust would keep her safe. But bonds can shatter. And for Tamarie, that moment was about to come. Swift, violent, and unforgettable. Before Tamarie ever stepped into the pool with them, before the crowds ever clapped at their tricks, Orkid and Splash had already lived through a nightmare. Splash was born in the wild. He was only a young calf when his pod was chased down by speedboats and airplanes, machines roaring above the waves, nets cast wide beneath the surface. He watched as his family panicked, thrashing, trying desperately to stay together. But the nets closed in. One by one, calves were torn from their mother's sides. Splash was among them. Hauled screaming from the ocean he called home, forced into a world of concrete and chlorine. Orkid's story was no less tragic. She was born in captivity, but her very existence was shaped by violence. Her mother, Captivity, had been taken from the wild years before, and during a performance in 1989 in front of a horrified audience, Captivity rammed another orca and bled to death in the tank, right next to her young calf, Orkid. From that day on, Orkid carried trauma in her veins. She was raised in a world where family bonds were shattered, where the walls echoed with grief and frustration. These were the whales Tamarie worked with. Not blank slates, not harmless performers, but intelligent, emotional beings carrying scars of captivity, both physical and psychological. And when whales like Orkid and Splash lashed out, it wasn't random. It was the weight of years of pain, frustration, and loss exploding to the surface. It started like any other show. The stadium was buzzing with excitement, the smell of popcorn in the air, cameras flashing as families settled in for what they thought would be a safe, joyful spectacle. Music pulsed through the loudspeakers as the gates opened, and the whales surged into the spotlight. Children pressed their faces against the glass, their eyes wide with wonder as the massive orcas leapt high into the air, crashing down in a spray that drenched the front rows. Trainers smiled, waving, directing the crowd's attention to each perfectly rehearsed move. From the outside, it all looked effortless, controlled, even magical. That day, Tamarie's partner was Orchid, a young but incredibly powerful female orca. Among trainers, Orchid had a reputation. Some called her playful, others unpredictable. She was known for her sudden mood swings, moments when her behavior would shift in ways that no one fully understood. Still, Tamarie trusted her. She had worked with Orchid many times before. The show began smoothly. Tamarie stood confidently at the edge of the pool, giving hand signals. Orchid responded on cue, spins, tail slaps, playful splashes that sent the audience into fits of laughter. Everything seemed perfect. But beneath the surface, something was changing. Witnesses would later say that Orchid didn't look quite right. Her circles grew tighter. Her breaths became sharper, louder, bursting through the water in quick, aggressive huffs. She slapped her tail against the surface with a force that echoed through the stadium like a warning shot. Some in the crowd thought it was part of the performance. Others weren't so sure. Tamarie, focused on keeping the routine flowing, continued signaling, but the tension in her body betrayed her calm smile. Something was wrong, and then it happened. In an instant, Orchid lunged. With explosive speed, she surged upward, her massive body colliding with Tamarie. The trainer was knocked off balance, crashing into the water with a violent splash. Gasps erupted across the stadium. Children screamed. Parents froze, unsure if this was a stunt or a real emergency. For a terrifying moment, Tamarie's body vanished beneath the surface. The music kept playing, but the show had stopped. Trainers on the sidelines leaned forward, panic spreading across their faces. Seconds felt like hours. Then Tamarie resurfaced. Her face broke through the water, and in her eyes the truth was unmistakable. This wasn't part of the act. She was fighting for her life. Orchid clamped down. The crowd gasped as Tamarie's body jolted violently, trapped in the jaws of a 5-ton predator. She thrashed desperately, arms flailing against the water, but it was like fighting against a freight train. The pool erupted in chaos, waves crashing, spray exploding into the stands. On the sidelines, trainers sprang into action. They blew sharp whistles, pounded the metal grates with fists, even slapped the surface of the water with poles. Anything to break Orchid's grip. Their voices echoed across the stadium, shouting frantic commands. But Orchid wasn't listening. Then came the moment no one could mistake. A dark cloud spread across the shimmering blue water. The pool had turned red. Tamarie's leg had been torn open. Parents scrambled to shield their children's eyes, but it was too late. Screams rose from the stands. Phones dropped. The illusion of safety was shattered. This wasn't a show anymore. This was survival. Above the surface, Tamarie fought with every ounce of strength she had left. Each time Orchid dragged her under, the audience held its breath. Each time she burst back through the surface, gasping, her face pale with terror, the crowd exhaled in relief. But she was weakening. Her wetsuit ripped apart, her skin bruised and bloodied. Every movement grew slower, every gasp more desperate. Trainers on deck tried to lure Orchid away, throwing handfuls of fish, waving targets, calling her name. Nothing worked. The whale's focus was locked on Tamarie, as though the years of trust between them had evaporated in an instant. Seconds dragged into minutes. The struggle felt endless. Every time Tamarie's head disappeared below the surface, a chilling thought gripped the crowd. Was that the last time they'd see her alive? Then, an opening. Another trainer blew a piercing whistle while tossing fish into a separate pool section. For a split second, Orchid hesitated. It was enough. She released her grip, veering toward the bait. Seizing the chance, two trainers reached down with poles, hooking Tamarie's vest, dragging her battered body toward the platform. With tremendous effort, they hauled her out of the blood-stained water. She collapsed onto the deck, limp, her wetsuit shredded, crimson trailing down her leg. The stadium was frozen in disbelief. No applause, no cheers, just stunned silence broken by the sound of whistles, radios, and frantic calls for paramedics. In the stands, children cried while parents whispered in horror about what they had just witnessed. As medics rushed forward, Tamarie Tollison, one of SeaWorld's most trusted trainers, lay barely conscious, a survivor of an attack that should never have happened. Tamarie's injuries were brutal. Her leg had been shredded, flesh torn open by Orchid's teeth. Deep lacerations marked her arms and torso, where the whale's immense force had slammed her against the pool walls. Bones were fractured. Her body bore the unmistakable scars of a life-or-death struggle. She survived, but the cost was devastating. And yet, what came next hurt in a different way. Instead of finding comfort, support, or even public acknowledgement, Tamarie was met with silence. Behind closed doors, SeaWorld executives moved quickly, not to protect their trainer, but to protect their image. This wasn't to be called an attack. It was softened, reshaped, rebranded. In official paperwork, it became just an incident. Trainers were quietly pulled aside and warned, "Do not speak to the press. Do not share details. Do not use the word attack." If asked, they were told to smile, to say that everything was fine, that safety protocols worked. The audience may have seen blood in the water, but in SeaWorld's narrative, nothing dangerous had happened at all. And Tamarie? She never spoke publicly about that day, not once. Some believe she was silenced by contracts she'd signed, strict non-disclosure agreements that made speaking out nearly impossible without risking her career or legal action. Others suggest she was pressured directly by management, discouraged from tarnishing the company's carefully polished family-friendly image. And perhaps, just perhaps, Tamarie herself chose not to relive the trauma, bearing the memory in silence. But silence has weight. Those who knew her best noticed the change. Friends described a spark in her eyes that seemed to vanish after that day. The joy she once carried into the water, the passion that had made her one of SeaWorld's most respected trainers, was replaced by something else: fear, pain, a quiet heaviness that words could not fully explain. And while Tamarie remained silent, whispers filled the gap. Former trainers, eyewitnesses, and animal behavior experts began piecing together a different story. A story SeaWorld didn't want the world to hear, a story that asked hard questions about what really happened in that blood-stained pool and why the truth was being hidden. Tamarie's horrifying struggle wasn't just a one-time tragedy. It was part of a bigger, darker reality that stretched far beyond the walls of SeaWorld. For decades, trainers have been injured, maimed, and in some cases, killed by the very animals they were told to trust. And yet the official narrative always seemed carefully polished, designed to convince audiences that everything was safe, that everything was under control. But the truth? In the wild, orcas almost never attack humans. These highly intelligent predators swim hundreds of miles a day, living in tight family groups, communicating with complex calls and hunting in coordinated packs. Inside a tank, that natural world is stripped away. Instead of roaming endless oceans, they circle endlessly in concrete pools, confined to a fraction of the space they need. Their teeth wear down from gnawing on metal gates. Their dorsal fins collapse, and their frustration festers. When orcas lash out in captivity, it isn't random aggression. It's the inevitable result of confinement, of treating powerful, emotional, intelligent beings like stage performers. Trainers like Tamarie put their faith in the bond they shared with these whales, but captivity twists that bond into something fragile and dangerous. Years later, the documentary Blackfish pulled back the curtain. It revealed the stories SeaWorld didn't want the world to know. The hidden incidents, the silenced trainers, the lawsuits buried under non-disclosure agreements. It showed that Tamarie's silence wasn't unusual. It was part of a larger system built to protect corporations, not people. And that's the chilling reality. Behind every smiling performance, behind every splash that delighted a crowd, there were risks, cover-ups, and lives forever changed. Tamarie's story wasn't just her own. It became a symbol of what happens when profit overshadows safety and when entertainment comes at the cost of truth. When Tamarie Tollison was pulled beneath the surface, when the water around her turned red, a cruel truth revealed itself. No amount of training, no carefully rehearsed routine could mask what orcas really are. Wild, powerful beings never meant for concrete walls. The crowd that day came for smiles and splashes. Instead, they witnessed terror. And Tamarie, once the picture of confidence and joy, was left broken. Her body carried deep scars, but the heaviest wounds were the ones no one could see. Nights filled with nightmares, flashes of teeth and water rushing into her lungs, the sound of panicked screams echoing in her mind. She had devoted her life to these animals, She believed in the bond, in the beauty of the connection. But after that day, the water no longer felt like home. It felt like a reminder of how fragile humans are when we try to control the uncontrollable. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part? Her voice was silenced. Whether by contracts, pressure, or pain, she never told her story publicly. But silence itself is a story of fear, a story of what happens when profit matters more than people. So the next time you see a whale leap in captivity, pause. Look past the music, past the painted smiles, past the illusion. Remember, Tamarie, remember the pool stained red. Remember that behind every performance lies a risk that nearly cost her everything. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. These stories deserve to be heard, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Should orcas ever be kept in captivity again? Or is it time we finally let them live free?